100 people in the audience, so I'd hate to keep you guys waiting. We say this every month, but this year's been really exciting, and it's crazy we've already, got into March, and we're on our third community call for this year. But yeah, it's a very exciting time with 1 week left for our pre-sale and hitting the exchanges next Tuesday. It's a crazy exciting time, and definitely a really good time to be part of Minima and seeing where we go next. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Luke, who will kick us off on updates.
Thanks, Isha. Yeah, hello everybody, and welcome along. It's good to have you. It's, as Isha says, a very busy time, a very exciting time. So I suppose the main things we'll go over, pre-sale, we've got 7 days left on that until that is over. So this is coming up on your last chance to get involved in that if you are still wondering about and looking to make a decision. That, of course, finishes on the 21st, and we hit exchanges on the 21st. We've already announced Bitfinex a few days ago, but today the exciting announcement is that we are listing on MEXC on the same day, 21st. So if that one is more of an interest to you, be sure to get yourself an account on there, and you'll be able to trade wrapped Minima, I should say, on the 21st. Looking at the verification process in KYC, as I can see, there's already been some questions, as Isha said, we won't be taking questions regarding that today, but a quick update. We introduced a new ticketing system, which if you have any questions about your verified KYC or anything vaguely to do with support, drop an email to querysupport@minima.global. That'll come through to our platform, and we will get to you as soon as we can. There's about 700 or so tickets on there at the moment, and we are working through them as quickly as we can. But be assured, if you contact us through that email address, which again is querysupport@minima.global, we will get back to you. That's everything from me, Isha.
Awesome, cool. Thanks, Luke. Yeah, super exciting with the new exchange listing today as well, and obviously Bitfinex, as we already announced. I'm just going to pass it on to Barry now if you wanted to discuss the latest wallet version or any updates from the tech side. Barry.
Well, I do think Paddy's more on the tech side, but we are working feverishly to get everything in place for launch. We're busy testing our mini swap, mini DApp, which will allow holders of native Minima to swap their native Minima for either ETH, US dollar T or US dollar C, or in fact wrapped Minima ERC20 tokens. That will be truly peer-to-peer, trustless and permissionless, and that should be ready for launch on the 21st. We've also been adding the security elements with the seed phrase and password lock, and added that to the wallet. The latest wallet version also has the ability to check to see if one of your 64 base addresses are in fact related to your own wallet, which a lot of people have had some concerns about. We've released the payments mini DApp for IC users to connect their nodes so they can receive their incentive reward payments at the right time. It's obviously important to secure your seed phrase so that if you do, for some reason, lose your node, you can recover. Because once that button is clicked, once you've elected to withdraw your funds to your wallet, that is permanent and can't be changed. I understand there's a few users who've had some issues there.
Awesome. Thanks, Barry.
Sorry, can I just chip in very quickly about the mini swap DApp? Because I think that's a very pertinent application at the moment. I'll try and be quick. Just to say, so we've got this mini swap DApp, and what that does is an HTLC swap, which is a very old technology. It's a hash time lock contract, but what's really nice about it is that it allows you to swap cross-chain one coin for another coin in a completely trustless and non-custodial way. And what's kind of cool about that is that it is a low-level primitive, by which I mean is this technology that allows you to swap these coins. We've wrapped it up in a mini DApp that allows you to go to peer-to-peer, but you could use that primitive and then use it as the back end for a mini DApp that looked like Binance, for instance. Yeah, all you need is an order book, and you can put people together. and then you can actually, move forward in a truly decentralized way. And that's the Minima way. And I sort of feel that's pertinent at the moment, because anybody who's seen what's going on and what happened to USDC and what happened to SVB and what's going on in the current centralized financial system will, sort of start getting little hairs standing up on the back of their necks, because I think people are starting to realize that these centralized structures are fallible in all the ways that people have been screaming and shouting about for the last 10 years. So, this idea about doing this stuff in a non-custodial, decentralized way, with no risk to your funds, where you are looking after your own coins, where you are not trusting an intermediary with your funds, is sort of becoming, totally and utterly evident and clear, in a way that maybe has taken 10 years to realize. I certainly remember 10 years ago, none of this mattered. Yeah, people would talk about this stuff and you go, come on, the banks, they've got your best interests at heart. And it's almost like the complete opposite is true now. And whenever you think about, even putting your money in a bank, you're like, oh God, are they going to just, spend it all or gamble it all or whatever? So I've come to the conclusion that it's basically a question of, if you're not going to do it that way, you're doing it wrong. If you're not going to write your system so that it does operate in a non-custodial, decentralized way, then, it doesn't matter what it does. It doesn't matter what features you add. It's broken. Yeah, you've got to come up with these systems that are trustless. That is the base level, and everything else you can build on top of that. And if you don't have that base level, then frankly, I'm not interested in using it. And I don't think you should be interested in using it, because we see absolutely clearly what happens. So yeah, that mini swap app is very, very cool, very interesting. Nice little base primitive that could be used in lots of different applications to come. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
No, that's perfect. Especially with, all the examples we're seeing of the need that highlight the need of decentralization, SVB, but then also earlier FTX and many such examples. There's definitely something valuable. Cool. I'm going to pass it on to Jazz now to discuss the workshop from last week. If you're available, Jazz.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So last week we had a workshop where we covered a lot of the security procedures. So how to find your seed phrase, how to encrypt your private keys, how to take a backup and restore, how to restore from an archive node. So those videos are available on YouTube now, along with videos on how to request withdrawal of your rewards. I would just like to say a little something on the side about server nodes. If you're running your node on a server and you've copied the code from the docs, which just uses a dummy password of 123, then please make sure that you change that, because it is a security risk to your node if you have an externally available IP address and you're using a default password of 123. So it's always important that your passwords are long and secure. You're not just using password or 123. So there is information in the docs for how to change your password. So please go and have a look at that if you have used 123. And so yes, just going back to requesting withdrawal of your rewards then. Before you request withdrawal, please make sure that you check your seed phrase first, write it down, and then take a backup of your node. So this means that you can always recover your node if you ever lose it. We can't change your withdrawal address after you've clicked that button, as Barry said earlier. So please just do these kind of basic node maintenance processes before you start. We have had a lot of queries about people saying that their withdrawal address isn't matching what they see in their wallet. So I would just like to say that in your wallet, you have a default 64 addresses. So in the latest version of the wallet, which is 2.0.12, which you can download from the dApp store, you can go to the receive page and you can copy your withdrawal address and you can put it in the check address feature, which will tell you that your withdrawal address matches your node. Your withdrawal address is automatically generated from your node. So the only reason that this would come back saying no is if you've subsequently uninstalled the app or done a clean install after clicking that withdraw button. So in that situation, you would need to either restore from a backup or do a seed phrase resync from an archive node, which we covered in the workshops last week. And also another couple of points. If you're running Minima on your Android device, please don't delete the app data. So when you go to your settings, your phone settings, and you go to the Minima app, there is an option to clear the app data. Please don't do this because this will wipe your node and you will have to restore from a backup or seed phrase resync. Same goes for if you're running on Docker and you delete the folder that's the Minima Docker 9001 folder. That is your base folder and that contains your node essentially. So if you delete that and you don't have a backup, then that is your node gone. So just a few important security bits to cover off there.
Awesome. Thanks, Jazz. And yeah, definitely check out the videos. I think Ryan's posted them in the stage chat and they're also available on our YouTube channel. Neo, did you want to add anything to that? The workshops?
No, she really covered it all.
Perfect. Awesome. So with that, I think I'll pass the baton on to Spartacus Rex to discuss all things Maxima and Chatter, especially in comparison to Nostra. I know he's really excited to discuss it with us, so I'll just pass it on to you.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure we've actually released Chatter yet, but that's something for you all to look forward to. The only reason they haven't released it is because the version that is currently available has been skinned by me. And those of you that understand me know that I'm a function man, not form. And so everyone's having a little fit about how it looks because, well, I like a very simplistic, look on my dApps. So yes, let's talk about Maxima. So I've talked a lot about Minima and all the funky, wicked things that it does, but we've also got this thing called Maxima, haven't we, that runs on top of Minima. So Minima is the base peer-to-peer layer 1 value transfer layer. And when you've got a peer-to-peer network the size that we have now on Minima, you can actually use it for something other than just value. You can use it for information. Now, the only difference between the value transfer and the information transfer is quite interesting, actually, because to validate value, everybody has to be involved. Giving somebody something affects somebody else. So when you post a Minima transaction, that is flood fill. That means I fill the entire network. Every single user gets every Minima transaction, and you all process that transaction and validate it like an accountant and make sure that it's true. Everybody has to do that because it's value. But when you're transmitting information, only the people that are involved in that need to see that transaction. Only people who are involved in relaying that information need to be involved. Transferring information isn't a flood fill operation. So whereas Minima operates on a flood fill basis, Maxima operates on a peer-to-peer basis. And the reason that's very interesting is because flood fill protocols don't scale. So layer 1s, all of us, Minima, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all of us, we don't scale on layer 1 because everybody has to process everything, or everybody should process everything, even though what they do on the other chains is that they get a smaller and smaller subset of people to validate those transactions, which is how they manage to increase their throughput. Whereas on Maxima, because it's peer-to-peer, that does scale. On Maxima, it is possible for all of you to be sending each other messages, and it doesn't affect everybody else. The only people that are involved are you and the person that you're sending it to, and the relay nodes that are processing that transaction to get the message to him. Now, Maxima does something very, very interesting. And what it does, which I've not seen on other networks is that it makes you pay to send your messages. How do you pay? You don't pay in Minima, you pay in work. And so when you want to send a Maxima message, you actually do the same thing that you would with a Minima transaction, and you mine that message. And that way, when you send it on through the network to the people that are involved in forwarding that message to the final recipient, everybody along the chain can objectively tell that you have done some work to protect the network. So the compact you have with the other users is you say, look, they say, look, I'll forward your message as long as you do some work protecting my coins. And this is another interesting thing, because Minima is a cooperative network. Game theoretically, Minima is a win-win situation. What this means is that when you're doing the work, you're not doing it to protect my coins. You're doing it to protect your coins. The work you do is based on your chain where you have your coins. And so you're not doing your work just to make me happy. You're doing that work to protect your coins. Now, if me and you are on the same chain, if you and me are on the same chain, then what that means is that when you protect your coins, you're also protecting my coins. So that's where the win-win comes in. It's not a situation where what you're doing doesn't matter to me and what I'm doing doesn't matter to you. What I'm doing is specifically relevant to me, and yet it affects you. And what you're doing is specifically relevant to you, and it protects your coins as well. So now we have this way where we have sort of not monetized, but we have sort of come up with a way of getting a use out of PAL that isn't to do with, mining coins. At a base level, what this means is that the more messages are sent over Maxima, the more secure the Minima network is. I'm sorry, Isha, I'm going to have to come back in 2 seconds. I've got there's somebody.
No worries.
I'll be back in 1 second. Sorry.
No worries at all.
I can actually chip in here, actually, Isha. Is that okay?
Perfect. That'd be great, John. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just cover for a bit. What Spartacus is saying is not just about the security of the network and nodes. It extends towards how we're actually running our communication in the channels, how we're interacting with each other, and how we're interacting with the network. So this point is about accountability. And accountability not only is around how you protect your node and your coins, it's also about how you look into information and you discover how to use Minima. What I've noticed is that there is a vast volume of people who are either ignoring or unaware of the documentation. In terms of where instructions are for things, you can go to docs.minima.global. And most of the time, the information's there. The rest of the time, you'll notice in the announcements channel, which is #announcements, you'll see all the things that have been announced with instructions. Then you can go to the videos, which includes all of the videos and tutorials. Then you can go to useful links, which includes information there you can click on, and the pinned messages. So in total, this is about accountability. And we all have a responsibility to look into these things. And rather than the kind of more seemingly easy way of just asking when or why not verify sir or any of the other kind of questions, all of those answers already exist. They're linked in forms, they're linked in emails. And so we all have accountability to find the answers and progress. And you'll find your journey with Minima extremely easy if you follow the instructions before just asking questions that fill up the chat. So it's an accountability point. Spartacus, you back with us?
Hi, sorry, my son had just discovered the buzzer and was constantly pressing it. Oh, sorry about that. So what I was going to say is, Minima, Maxima. The more messages you send on Maxima, the more secure the Minima network is. The more secure the Minima network is, then the more value you can store securely on the network. The more value you can store securely on the network, the more valuable the network. And so what we've got is a nice logical linear progression from the number of messages you send on Maxima, the value of your Minima coins. This is a very interesting thing. I've not seen this anywhere. Yeah. So we've got a scalable technology that actually directly impacts the value of Minima. So we want you to send, Maxima messages. I want you to use the network to send your messages, because the more messages you send, the more work you do, the more secure the Minima network is. So now that we have this tech, what are we going to do with it? Okay. I mean, well, just to say another few little things about Maxima that are quite interesting. Maxima has been written with decentralization and security as the base layer. So I'm going to have to say that reliability is something that will come. I think we're on about 98%, 97% reliability of a message actually reaching its recipient. But the thing that it's really designed to do is to make sure that no one can ever know what you're saying, who you're saying it to. This is because every time you connect to the Maxima network, you pick a new random name, a new random ID. So one day you're going to be XYJ at, for instance, hotmail.com. And the next day you're going to be vxy at gmail.com. Then the next day you're going to be blah, blah, blah at myemail.com. And every day you pick a different address. And what you do is you send that information to your contacts. That's what the contacts list does. Yeah, you can actually send a message to anybody on the Maxima network. The only thing the contacts, you will all have noticed in the APK that there's that contacts thing. What that contacts thing does is it says, update these people with my current address on the network. And that address on the network constantly changes. And every time it changes, you pick a completely new random public-private key pair, and then you send that information out to your contacts and say, hey guys, I've changed my position. This is where I am now. And an hour later, you're like, no, hey guys, now I'm over here. And that's really important, because that means that it's very, very hard to DOS you. It's very, very hard to spam you, because as soon as you don't want someone to get hold of you, you just don't tell them where you are on the network and you disappear. All the messages are encrypted, all the messages are signed, so only the person that you sent the message to can read the message, and the person knows that you're the one that sent it. So in this regard, we've got a very robust, secure network for messaging. This is the Maxima network. So now what are we going to build on top of it? We've got this tech. So I've written this little app called Chatter. Yeah. Everybody on Twitter is going crazy for this. Nostr, damn us, let's try and write a decentralized version of Twitter. Anybody who's been using Twitter lately can tell something's happened. Yeah, it's always really slow, and I don't know quite what's going on. And so they came up with this Nostr thing. Now, anybody who's looked at the specifications of Nostr will be, surprised, as I was, to see that it's almost identical to the JSON packet that we send over the Maxima network, which is lovely. It's always great to have your work validated. And so, they're loving this idea that you can, send these messages to people in a sort of decentralized way. But what I've noticed is that there's sort of grumblings going on, because they've realized that the relays don't have an incentive to relay your messages. Boom, boom. Yeah, we have attempted to come up with peer-to-peer networks before. There have been prior attempts to try to do a network that we could all use. And what all of them lacked, and what Minima does not lack, is the incentive compatibility of your peer-to-peer information layer. What I mean by that is that altruism isn't enough. It doesn't work. So all the other networks, and Nostr is included in that, rely on people, nerds like me and other people going, yeah, I'll set up a node, and yeah, you can just, bounce your messages through me. But what always happens is that always explodes. There's always way more people who want to use the tech rather than want to run the tech. Yeah, that's just the way of the world. Whereas on Minima, what I say is, you can bounce your messages through me as long as you protect my coins, as long as you do the work. And that's really, really important, because it means that we are incentive compatible. Yeah, I'm noticing on the Nostr, they're all having to say, well, look, now we're going to have to put the images on CDN because there's too many people using this relay or that relay, et cetera, et cetera. So when you come up with, applications that run, you need to think about whether they're going to scale, whether the protocol itself is going to be able to handle 1 billion users. Yeah. Or is it going to be the fact that there's always a bottleneck where everything always breaks? Because that's what always happens. So when you're trying to come up with a new version of Twitter, for instance, what I've done is I've come up with this protocol called Chatter. And I just had to explain that when you write a mini dApp, you're not writing an application. This isn't the world of centralized applications. This isn't Twitter that I'm writing. What I'm doing is I'm writing an implementation of a decentralized protocol. So in the Chatter application, I've written the protocol down, fits on one page of text. It's basically 2 message types. I can send a message and I can request a message. That's it. I specify it to the nth degree so that everybody who wants to write an implementation of it can. And then I write an implementation. I write a mini dApp that speaks that language. And this is really important because it means that I have no control over it. Anybody can take my mini dApp and they can change it. Anybody can write another one. And as long as you implement the same protocol, as long as you stick to the message format that I've said, look, this is what I listen to, this is what I expect a chatter message to look like, then your application can speak to my application, can speak to someone else's application. So how are you going to write? So this is what I've done with chatter. And then you think to yourself, okay, so what are we going to do? Can I send a message to 1 million people and can they all reply? And you've got to think about this. And it's like, well, no, you can't do that. Because how's my phone going to handle 1 million requests? How am I going to be able to get it? How am I going to be able to process that much information? So you simply can't think about the application in that way. It's not a question of me following you. Yeah. If I'm running a chatter account and 1 million people start to follow me, does that mean 1 million people can send me messages? That's not going to work. Yeah, that's going to blow up my phone. So actually on chatter, what I've done is I've reversed that. I've flipped it. And what happens is that you write a message, just like on Twitter. You say, hey, isn't the world a beautiful place? And then you send that out to your contacts. And then your contacts, just your contacts. So I've got 20 people who are in my contacts. So I send 20 messages to 20 people. I say, the world's a beautiful place. They see this in their chatter app. And what do? They go, oh, that's a lovely tweet you've just done there, Pat. I think I'll retweet that. I'll rechat that. And what they do is they take that message and then they forward it. And they say, I'm going to rechat that. And that goes on to their contacts. And so on and so on. The other people, and then the contacts that get that can decide whether they want to rechat it. And so in this way, what you do is you make a system that propagates outwards from you. You can choose to make somebody on chatter a super chatter, as I've called them. And what this means is that you say, look, whenever I receive a message from this person, I automatically want to rechatter it onto my contacts. And that's really nice because it actually means that it is perfectly possible that a message that somebody sends could propagate out to 1 million people. But that message will have propagated through 5, 6, 7 hops to get there. And when somebody wants to reply to that message, the same thing happens. So I say, isn't the world a beautiful place? And somebody replies and says, no, I think it's rubbish. Maybe that message gets sent to their contacts. And they look at that message and they say, well, I'm not really sure that's a great message. I'm not going to rechat to that. But if somebody replies to your message with a really salient, intelligent comment and goes, oh, yes, well, the world is, a sphere, or whatever it is they say, and you go, oh, that's a nice comment, they can rechat to that. And that message will propagate backwards across the network to me as well. When you rechat a message, you always rechat the parent messages as well, so the full thread of the conversation can be understood. And everything bounces through your peers. And what this sort of means is that you now have a filter system. You now have a system where messages, only the cream will get through. Only the good messages will be propagated. Only the messages that your friends and your friends' friends and your friends' friends' friends decide to propagate will get through to you. And what's interesting about that is that scales. There's no way 1 million messages are going to get, filtered through my contacts to me. There's no way they're going to receive 300,000 messages. There's no way their friends are going to receive, 15,000 messages each. They're just not going to be pressing the button enough. And so actually what this does is it comes up with a protocol that doesn't have that bottleneck. It doesn't have that centralization element. It's completely decentralized. It looks like Twitter. I mean, my version doesn't quite look like Twitter, but I know that Dynamite is skinning it, and I'm sure it'll look beautiful when he does. But the application itself is written in such a way that all of us could be on it. All of us could be chatting. All of us could be rechattering what we think are the good messages. And that obviously, on Maxima, all applications benefit Maxima. And there's no bottleneck. There's no way that is going to blow up in some fashion. So that's a scalable protocol. That's a scalable application built on top of a scalable protocol. I wish that you had it. I'm hoping that in the next couple of days we can give it to you to play with. But that's a pure Maxima application. And it's also obviously totally censorship resistant. It's also, nobody knows what other people are chatting to other people. I get asked a lot by the team. It's like, well, look, can somebody, when they receive the message, can they reply to you directly? And I'm like, no, they can't reply to me directly because how's that going to work? What if 1 million people get the message and 1 million of them want to send me a message? That can't happen. Yeah, that doesn't scale. They'll have to reply with something salient that actually manages to propagate through the filters of friends and friends and friends to get back to me. That's how you can reply to me. Yeah, not directly, indirectly, by writing something so wonderful that it gets back to me. So that's Chatter. That's a pure Maxima application. That is a really nice incentive. Like Max Solo, which is our very simple POC, WhatsApp clone, which is coming along. This is another pure Maxima application where the more of you that use it, the more messages you send, the better the experience of the application, and super importantly, the more secure the Minima network. So it's a sort of win-win, another win-win situation. You can write these pure Maxima applications and not worry about it, because we are incentivized to continue running the Maxima network. Those of us who run the nodes that relay your messages are incentivized correctly to be there. To there's not going to be a situation where it's like, I think I can't forward these messages anymore, because the more messages you send me, the more secure the network, the more valuable my Minima coins are. It's a very nice, simple thing. So I very much look forward to you all playing with that.
Someone's asking, is it possible to delete a message, and is it totally wiped off without a single trace, just like Twitter?
No, and that's why it works. So when you say something, you have to own your words. When you send a message out and I receive it, that message is now mine. I mean, it's signed by you. I can't fake it. I can't say that. I can't send a message and pretend that you said it. I can't send, I could send a copy of that message and sign it as myself. But the point is, when you go to the pub and you have a chat with someone and you say something, and then they take those words and they go and tell their friends about it, and then their friends go and tell their friends about it, I can't stop you doing that. That's the whole point. So when I delete a message in Chatter, I can delete it from my phone. I can delete it from my Maxima node, so I don't see that message anymore. But everybody who received that message now that data now belongs to them. That data is now out there in the world, signed by you. So you better be careful what you say, frankly, even though you don't have to be, because nobody can stop you. I think that's a very important point. I think, realizing that it's not up to me to start deleting data off your machine. Yeah, this is the point about these applications, these decentralized applications on a centralized server on Twitter. It'd be very easy to delete the data and to make sure that nobody ever saw it again. But when you say something and you send it out, sorry.
Another interesting thing is that your Chatter stream only begins when you install the mini dApp, so each user's feed is unique.
Absolutely, because there is no central server. There's no website. There's no chatter.com. There's nowhere you can go and download this stuff. Now you could add to the protocol. You could say, look, if I speak to someone and I ask them for their history, can they send it to me, one of my contacts or somebody else? Then you could add that on top. But at a low level, how would that work? Who is storing this data? Like, one of the nice things, I mean, it's funny because a lot of people think that the features are bugs, and what they need to realize is that these are features and not bugs. So for instance, on Maxima, when you send me a message, if I'm not connected to the network, I don't get that message. And when I reconnect to the network, I've had this question many times. They're like, well, can't I just download the messages that I've missed in the time? And it's like, well, who's going to do that for you? Who's looking after your messages? Why aren't you connected to the internet? This is exactly the point. You're in charge. Yeah, you're the one who's running the server. You're the one who's there accepting the messages. And if you're not there to accept the messages, then you don't get them. The relay node will forward the message, but he's not storing these messages. Imagine he had to store millions of messages. That's going to take loads of time, loads of memory. What the network says is, it says, look, if you send me a message and you've done the work, I'll forward it to someone if I'm connected to them. If I'm connected through various hops to that person, fantastic. But if you turn your computer off, then no, you can't receive messages. And no one's going to look after those messages for you, because they're your messages. They're not important. Once you've done the work and once I forwarded the message, I'm like, that's it, I'm done with it. And that's a feature, that exemplifies that you are the one who is in control of this system, that no one else is running it for you. That you're actually in charge of, your data and actually receiving the data and sending the data. This is the feature. This is why Maxima works.
And so if our community members install Chatter, they can see your messages, even if they're not a contact of yours, because someone that they're connected to, one of their Maxima contacts, may be connected to you and they've rechatted your message.
Yes, I mean, I'll be very boring. I'm sure you won't want to listen to me. But yeah, if you are connected to someone who is connected to someone who is connected to someone who is connected to me, and each of the intermediaries, they can have me as a super chatter. That means that when I do something on Chatter, it will propagate across the network and you will get it. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the point. So, but it's more about, it's like we flipped it. Rather than you following me, it's more about whether people want to push you. We've made it so that now, instead of millions of people following some person, that person is actually the one who has to come up with good stuff, which gets propagated, push network, has to do stuff, has to say things that are valuable and interesting and cool and salient, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what gets propagated across the network. So it's sort of flipped. But yes, they can receive those messages.
So as a follow-up then, I know someone's asked this, how could we manage, or how do you manage a scale of chatter, especially with, the super chatter concept that you mentioned earlier?
How do we manage the scale?
Yes. How would the scale be managed?
So there really isn't any issue. You only ever send messages to your Maxima contacts. That's it. So at most you'll be sending it to 20 people, and at most you'll be receiving messages from 20 people. That's it. What those people choose to forward to you and what you say to those people and how many messages there are, that is never going to become millions of messages. Yeah, the messages that simply aren't good enough, the messages that don't have anything pertinent or nice to say, are not going to get across the network. And in fact, what's quite interesting is that this social graph, how many hops will it take to get across the network? Will there be disparate groups of people on Chatter who don't interact with each other? Will some people be talking about some things on this side of the network while some people were talking about something totally different on the other side of the network? Will those people agree with what they're saying with you? Probably not. Will there be corners, where certain things are discussed and certain things are not discussed? And I should think absolutely that's going to happen. But in terms of the scale, the reason it works is because I'm never messaging to 1 million people. I'm messaging to 20 people. And I'm never receiving messages from 1 million people. I'm receiving messages from 20 people. And so if there was ever going to be some cascade, some avalanche of messages hitting me, then that means that would have had to have hit my friends. And that would have had to have hit my friends' friends. And they're not going to put up with that either. If somebody starts spamming you with lots of rubbish messages, just stop, remove them as a contact. And then, 5 minutes later, they won't know where you are on the network. You'll have disappeared off into the peer-to-peer, with a different public key. And, whenever you delete a person, you always choose a different public key and a different private key so they can't actually get hold of you, even if they wanted to. So that's why it scales, because that's just not how it works. Yeah, You never speak to more than a small group of people.
No, that's perfect. We've still had a lot of questions about it, and someone's asked about imagination mapping and trying to visualize the process. But I think what you're saying is it's a small amount of propagation per player, so you're not actually doing too much. No individual person is doing too much work, so scalability isn't an issue.
Well, unfortunately, I say that for me, unfortunately, it may be the case that you do propagate across the whole of the network. It may be the case that, people like Baz and, Buddha and me and Jazz do acquire a super chatter status with, multiple people. And this means that when we do it, a chat, got to come up with good words for this. When we do come up with a chat, maybe it will propagate across the entire network. Maybe everybody will go, well, I'll make Spartacus a super chatter. That means whenever you receive something from me, you'll forward it. So the scope of how far a message can go is the entire network. But the scope of whether people can then get back to the people, who sent that message, that's a different thing. A nice feature would be tipping. A lot of people say, oh, can you tip? And I always say, yes, but not on layer 1. Yeah, that's not going to work. So when we get Omnia going and we get our Lightning network going, you could tip people. Yeah, you're never going to be able to do this on layer 1, not on any other chains. But you'd easily be able to do it on layer 2. So that could be a feature that we add. Another question I get asked is, do you know how many people have seen your message? No, you don't. And again, that's a feature, not a bug. That's why it scales, because I can't know. How do you know how many people have listened to your idea? You have a good idea, you have a chat with someone in the pub, they go off, they talk to somebody else, they go off and speak to somebody else. How many people have heard your idea? No idea. I don't know who's heard my idea. And this is exactly why memes scale. This is exactly why an idea can traverse the world, because you don't know how many people have, you've affected, how many lives you've touched. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe just to give a bit of a summary of all of that great information. Chatter is a decentralized, scalable, permissionless microblogging and social media messaging mini DApp. And it will allow you to share text, images, basic HTML, or link audio and video files from the web to your Maxima contacts. Rechatting or replying to a post. If you rechat or reply to a post, you will forward it on to your Maxima contacts, and that will spread the post further across the network. And there's no limit to how far one of your posts could reach. Great chats will spread, but unpopular chats will not. And the system self-filters and self-manages. And
yes,
when your chatter stream begins when you install the mini DApp, and everyone's will be unique. And so we create this kind of web-like social graph between all of the Minima users, and every post, repost, and reply, chat, rechat, and reply will contribute additional security to the Minima blockchain. There's no centralized server, no website, and none of it's centralized, so there's no stress on a single point of failure. And so Chatter is essentially its own thing. It's not like anything else we've seen. It's not like Twitter, and it's not like Facebook.
Exactly right, Jazz. Like most of Minima, it's like never before. We've never seen its ilk or kind.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And many of you in the chat today will remember that the weekend before last, I dropped my permanent Maxima address into the public chat and asked you all to add me as a contact, and then send me a message on Max Solo, and I would send you some dust. I immediately had 250 contacts. We were trying to break the system. We were trying to see how far it would go. And obviously having 250 contacts means that whenever you send out a chatter, you have to do 250 times the work to send a message to each individual. So we've realised that, probably the maximum number of contacts that you should really be entertaining on your node is somewhere between 10 and 25, depending on the power.
Your top chats on WhatsApp. When you look at your WhatsApp, who are the top 25 people you chat to? There's only so many messages that pop up and down in there. And it's like, those are actually the people you need to get in touch with. And frankly, anybody else, you can probably get in touch with them via Hop. Yeah, Hop. So the more contacts you have, whenever you change on the network, you have to tell everybody where you are. That involves doing work because you're sending messages to each of those people. So, I have to say there is Maxima V2 in the works, which has got some nice optimizations coming. That'll be in not the V2 version, but the version 1.1. So it might be possible to maybe extend that to 50 to 100 users, but do be careful with how many contacts you add. I genuinely think at the moment, in its current state, you can probably get away with, less than 50. To be safe, 20. Yeah, you can definitely have 20 because I've got 20 and it works fine. But once you start getting into the higher numbers, you're going to melt your phone, which is fine because you're going to do a lot of work, but it's going to be a bit. It might start to become too much. So do be careful about that.
Cool. Spartacus, perhaps this is a great opportunity to discuss, Maxima and the static MLS and having a permanent address and what that involves.
Well, that's if you want to have a permanent, because there's lots of applications being written by lots of our teams. One of the great ones is DBay, decentralized eBay, which is trying to be a system running over Maxima where anybody can sell anything to anyone, which obviously I'm very up for. In that scenario, what you'd like to do is you'd like to send out a message that says, look, I want to sell this bike and I want this for it, these tokens or this NFT or blah, blah, blah. A nice way. I'm trying to write a decentralized exchange which just does tokens for Minima, and that would probably use the same sort of protocol. And so how do people get in touch with you if they want to? It is possible to give yourself a static address. The problem, I mean, I like the static addresses, but the problem with the static address is that you can be DOSed. Yeah, this denial of service thing is, unfortunately part of human nature. As soon as you tell people, where you live, as soon as you tell people what your address is, you can start being DOSed in the real world. Yeah, and it's even easier to do in the digital world, which means that thousands and thousands of people can send you thousands and thousands of things because you've told them where to send it. So on Maxima, your current location is fluid. You move around the network constantly and you only update your friends as to your position. But if you were to say, well, actually, I've got a really big bad boy server and I've got it off Google and I can handle the traffic that you can throw at me, it's perfectly possible for you to have a static address. Like you might actually run a website. You could run you could do whatever you wanted once you've got that. It means that you could have an address on a website and people could then contact you from there without you constantly having to update that with your shifting position on the network. So for the sort of power users who may require a little bit extra, but understand the risks involved in that, it is possible to do those things. And I might add, this is, again, one of those situations where, of course, you can put centralized structures on top of a decentralized base. Yeah, that's the point. We operate on a decentralized basis. That is the core of everything we do at Minima. It's non-custodial, you're in charge, you can do what you want. But if you then on top of that want to, put your own things, there's nothing I can do to stop you, correctly so. And if you wish to, add centralized servers, which allow you to have a permanent address, that's perfectly possible. And that's part of the game. There's nothing to stop you doing that. So I think we have quite a few tutorials about that on lots of docs about it. But that's more for the power user, I would say.
I mean,
Awesome.
that's exactly what happened to me after having 250 contacts a couple of weeks ago. I then deleted them all, went and made a cup of tea, came back, and 144 had re-added me.
You're the ultimate power user, Baz.
I had to change my MLS. So please don't get offended if I've deleted you.
Let's pass.
Right. T-shirt.
Let's pass to Isha
Sorry,
now for the next question. Thank you.
Just looking at the time, I think we'll jump onto questions. Cool. This one's for you, Spartacus. The first question is from Mon3, actually. How do you see the potential challenges of getting devs to build open source mini dApps, given the immense difficulty of generating revenue in this way?
You have to offer something more than the app. So when you're writing a decentralized protocol, how to extract value from these situations. In the traditional sense, when you write an application, you say, hey, I wrote this application and I want to be paid for it. Yeah. And that's how they used to do it. And if you don't pay me, then you can't use my app. In the decentralized sense, that's not the way to look at it. How does open source software even work? Who's going to, I say this as someone who's been using Linux for 20 years, and it's always incredible, and people just don't understand. And they're like, well, why would anybody spend all their time writing open source software that everybody else can use? Yeah, there's clearly value to be extracted from that situation, but it is not in the run-of-the-mill way. So, if, for instance, in this idea of DBay or in this idea of a decentralized exchange, one way that I can think of, which would be nice, is that you need an order book. Yeah, so we've got this primitive tech now, this primitive piece of technology that at the very base layer, which is this HTLC swap contracts. Where do I find people who want to sell me stuff? Where do I find people who want to buy my NFTs? Well, somebody could run an order book. What that means is that they would run, either with a static Maxima address or with a traditional website and blah, blah, blah. And they say, look, you can post your orders on my order book. And then people can come to my order book and they can see they can see who's selling what, and I will put you in contact with each other. That's a valuable service. That's a value add. People would pay for that. And we're talking microtransactions. We're talking hundredths of a penny, thousandths of a cent. But when you're writing a decentralized protocol, what you find is that there's always things that you could add to it. And what you also find is that anybody could do this. And so only the people who offer the service genuinely, only the people who offer the best service, which is correct, should be the ones that make the money out of it. Yeah. So you can extract value from a decentralized protocol by being the best at offering a service that this protocol might need. It's just the fact that anybody else could do it too. And that's totally fine, because, what it means is that we want the cream to rise to the top. We want the best players to be the ones that make the money. There's nothing wrong with paying people for doing stuff. That's part of commerce. That's what we want entrepreneurship. But, you need to offer a good service.
Mm-hmm. We have another one from month 3, actually. So thank you for that. But do you know what's something that's similar to Miniswap that currently exists, if anything? And is it possible to use the Miniswap source code and implement it within, another developer's, someone else's mini dApp?
Absolutely. Once we release the Miniswap app, this is the whole point about mini dApps, that you can unzip them. That's why they're MDS.zip. They used to be called .minidap, but nobody understood that they were just zip files. So they're just MDS.zip. They're zip files. You can open them, and there's the complete source code. And we absolutely encourage everybody to have a go at coming up with their own versions. And in terms of, are there any other technologies out there that use HTLC? Well, I have to say, I think the ordinals on Bitcoin use that tech. They use partially signed Bitcoin transactions. So I say that's on chain. So that's the thing about HTLCs, is that they work cross chain. The thing about what Miniswap does is it operates from one chain to another chain. But the principle is that you have to construct these clever transactions that have inputs from various users, and that you don't actually post it until both of you are happy with the transaction. You can build a transaction, not sign it, give it to the other user. He can have a look at it and go, yeah, I'm going to add my inputs and I'm going to add your outputs. So you're paying me this and I'm giving you this. And only when everybody's happy do I sign it. And then once we both signed it, then we can post it. So ordinal auctions currently work using what is in the tutorial, the multi-sig, multi-coin. As for the HTLC, it's such old tech. On Bitcoin Talk, we used to talk about this, 8 years ago now, people were coming up with this stuff. But it never really took off because there wasn't really much you can do with Bitcoin. Again, just 5 or 6 more opcodes and Bitcoin would take off, but they never added them. So I can't actually think of anything that uses it the way we have come up with using it. It's known tech, it's old school stuff, but there's no way you could actually do it the way we do it. Sorry, this is the way it is.
Cool. No, thank you for that. I'll try and jump onto the other questions now, seeing as we have 5 minutes left. Maybe, Luke, you could answer this one about the ambassador program plans in the future, and benefits in the long run to award long-standing ambassadors.
Yeah, absolutely. So the ambassador program will continue, long after the 21st. We're very grateful for our ambassadors and all the work that they've done to help us grow the the network of node runners and spread the word of the pre-sale. There won't be any rewards included as part of the distribution that's currently ongoing, but we do have plans for rewards of a different sort linked to people's XP totals that they've earned through the ambassador platform in the coming months. I can't discuss it any further at the moment, but there are definitely things coming in the pipeline for you.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you for that. Then we've got another question that I think Jazz has already answered. But in terms of the P2P messages between members of the community, what specifically are members doing in terms of work when they're taking part? Jazz.
Sorry, Jazz, I'll just chip in. You're doing exactly what you do. You actually construct a TX-POW unit and you mine it. So it is exactly what you do as if you were sending a transaction, just that you obviously haven't got a transaction. So you send a TX-POW, which doesn't in and of itself have any inputs and outputs, but does have the transaction list of unseen transactions on the network. So when you send a maximum message, it's exactly the same as sending a minimum message, just that instead of flood filling the whole network, you only send it to 2 or 3 people who are involved in the transmission of the message. And if it's a block, so obviously there's no point in it being a transaction because it doesn't do anything. And what they do is that they check that you've done the work. This is the beauty of POW. Yeah, you couldn't do this on a proof of stake network. POW is objective. I can't fake it. When I give it to you, you don't need to speak to anybody. You can look at the maths. You can look at the hash of it and say, oh, look, there's the right number of zeros. Yeah, that's how to think about POW. When you look at the TX POW units, when you look at the block hashes on the network, you'll notice they start with a certain amount of zeros. That can't be faked. And so when you send a Minima message, you do a little bit of work. And I can say, well, I better start with, 3 or 4, 1 0. I want 1 0 at the beginning of the hash of your message. And that shows me that you did the work, that you did a number of calculations. Yeah, you did a bit of work and you did it on my chain. And ergo, you protected my coins. Yeah, that's what I'm interested in. But what's interesting is that you've actually protected your coins. And then if that turns out to be a block, then we propagate it out to the rest of the network. If it doesn't turn out to be a block, no problem. You did your work. That's fine. I'll forward the message. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think Jazz mentioned, just a small amount of hashing. And the docs, go through the details so you can learn about it over there. Cool. I'll just ask one more question to Luke, if that's all right. This is a question surrounding node count post TGE and what the community can do to help.
Well, as we know, the push with the node count to get us up to this point was about growing the network as large as possible to bring security to the chain. That has been the drive up to this point. Into mainnet, what we would imagine is that in order to use the mini dApps and the services and also our partners are worth a mention there as well, in using Minima for its intended purpose, they'll be using the node anyway. So as we move forward, it should be less about running a node for node's sake. You'll be using the node for its intended purpose. In terms of bringing more people to us to grow the network, it'll be less about running a node again for node's sake. It'll be about using mini dApps, things like Chatter, things like some of the applications that third parties are looking at building, like DBay has been mentioned, which is a marketplace. By getting people...
Sorry, I'm just going to have to chip in there and just say, very importantly, and maybe something that has been missed out in all our ranting, you don't need to have any Minima coins to run Maxima applications. You don't need to know anything about, Minima, tokens, private keys, public keys. So if Chatter were to be something that you liked, if you all thought, Chatter's kind of cool, you could get your friends to run Chatter. They don't have to have any Minima coins. This is the beauty of them paying in hash. This is the beauty of messages being propagated for a valuable thing, for this work that we need you to do without you actually having to have any coins. So actually, if we write a killer Maxima dApp, then they may just use that. They may install Minima simply to use Chatter, and that's totally fine. That's absolutely perfect. We don't need you to use Minima. We don't need you to use the tokens or the Minima coins or the value transfer layer. You can just use the Maxima layer. And we're all very happy that you do that, because every time you send a message, you're making the network more secure, blah, blah, blah. Minima is more valuable, et cetera, et cetera. So we can grow on the back of mini dApps that purely use Maxima. You don't have to touch Minima at all. Frankly, this is what the car people love, because the car people want the cars to talk to each other and information. And we're like, all right, as long as they do the work, they can use the network. They don't have to worry about whether they've got any Minima. They don't even have to do, frankly, you don't even really need to do any backups, because, in the current version of Minima, you can do max create, which gives you a public-private key. You can always be the same person, and you can wipe your Minima node and restart it, install your Maxima identity, and you don't care about the Minima bit. So in the future, maybe we'll get, if we were to write as a proper Max, a WhatsApp clone, which I know is perfectly possible from a technical sense, we could write something that looked and operated the same as WhatsApp, but it ran over Maxima, so that when you looked at it in web WhatsApp, or we could do it as a native Android application, and we could do it as the web WhatsApp, which is, frankly, a very nice application. You know what I mean? We all use it. It's very nice. It functions correctly. If we were to do that and people were just to use it for that purpose, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, more the better. More the better. That's exactly what we want. So that would be a way of getting people to use it. Say, hey, look, there's this new version of Twitter. It's called Chatter. Come and use that. Don't worry about the Minima bit. That'll do fine. We shall benefit from all the work you do. Perfect. And they shall benefit because they get to use these wonderful applications.
Absolutely right. Talk to people about the things that interest them that they can do with Minima, not necessarily about Minima itself. So if they value their privacy, you can look at Chatter. If they take a look at the financial world around at the moment and they want to look at decentralized finance, introduce them to Minima's wallet, be their own bank. That's the way to go at it going forward. It's about what they can do with Minima, not about the node itself.
Perfect. Thanks, Luke, and thanks, Spartacus, as well. I think that's a good place to wrap up. 2 minutes over time. So thank you so much for joining. I think before we do head off, in terms of support requests, we've seen a lot of questions that can easily be answered, like John said, from the docs. So please make sure that you are looking at the docs before asking questions. But then if you do have support requests, emailing through to query support@minima.global. And keeping an eye on everything that's happening over the next week, especially with us setting the exchanges next Tuesday. There's bound to be a lot of information coming your way, so just stay on top of that. Anyone else have anything else to add before we wrap up?
Thanks for taking the time to listen to us. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.